So welcome everybody today. This is the RIBA Future Architects discusses dealing with uncertainty, and I'm going to hand over straight away to Nicola.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate. Welcome everybody. I'm going to help us today facilitate a discussion around a really important topic, actually, that we might have real mixed feelings about. So uncertainty, for some, uncertainty can be a good thing. It can bring change and opportunity, but for others, uncertainty can be quite an anxious time. And I want to just quickly introduce the panel that we've got to talk about this today, and a little bit about their role and where they are professionally at the moment. So we can really explore this concept, look at what the challenges are around it, and hopefully get some tips about how we might cope better, I suppose, with uncertainty. So I'm Nicola Rich. I'm a mental health first aid instructor. I'm also a trained psychotherapist, but I work a lot with organisations in terms of improving and helping the mental health and the psychological health, really, of organisations. Nadia, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nadia. I'm a psychotherapist as well, but I've got vast experience in mental health and wellbeing, ranging from students to severe mental health illnesses, as well as working with lots of different companies implementing wellbeing strategies and initiatives.
Great, thank you. Benjamin, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, so my name's Benjamin and I'm going into my final year of my undergraduate degree at the University of Nottingham.
And Tom?
Hi there, my name's Tom Shaw. I work at the charity, the Architects Benevolent Society, and I'm a supporter relations officer there. My role is to try kind of raise the profile of the charity, connect with universities and practices, try help the wider architecture profession.
Great, thank you, Tom. And Chithra, can we come to you?
Hi, my name's Chithra Marsh. I'm an Associate Director at Buttress Architects. I lead on our health and wellbeing programme and pastoral care of our staff.
Great, thanks. And Ben?
Hi Nicola, my name's Ben Channon. I'm an architect. I'm now head of wellbeing at Assael Architecture and one of the co-founders of the Architects Mental Wellbeing Forum. I also wrote a book a couple of years ago called Happy by Design, which has a look at kind of the relationship between buildings and mental health. And I've kind of spoken openly over the years about my issues with mental health and anxiety and uncertainty in my 20s. So I've experienced lots of what we're going to probably talk about today firsthand.
Thanks, Ben. I've read the book. It's very good, so thank you. And finally, my name is Rachel. Can we come to you?
Hi, my name is Rachel Marshall, and I'm a Part 2 student at the University of Nottingham.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. What I love about this today is we've got a real mixture of experience, those in the profession, those maybe starting out, to those that have been in it for some time. But then we've also got Nadia, who can share some of her wisdom from a psychological, professional perspective. So let's get started, really, because the topic of this is uncertainty. And over the last few months, this has been a particularly uncertain time for everybody. So I'm curious how you found that personally and professionally. What has that period of time or the recent period have been like for you? So Chithra, could we come to you first? How have you found and coped with the last few months?
Well, from a personal perspective, I'd say it's gone in waves. Sometimes you're really, obviously we're trying to manage 54 staff at Buttress, shared amongst 6 directors. And it's been hit and miss, I suppose. We started off really well, and then as the months have gone forward, it sort of ebbed and flowed. We've tried to concentrate, probably put more concentration on looking after our staff. So I've definitely been involved in a lot more pastoral calls to make sure that, especially the younger staff, the students that have come in, particularly the Part 1 students that have not necessarily ever had any experience in a working environment, and then also a very unusual working environment as well. So we've paid particular attention and care to those younger members of staff to make sure that they understand that they can take a rest away from the screen, that they don't need to be present at their computers throughout the working day, to remember what they actually did in dividing their time up while they were in the studio you know, say going and making a coffee and maybe having a chat with a few colleagues and stuff like that. So the environment has been very different for them. And I think that's affected everybody across the board. Now going out of lockdown and into another new environment, it's now how we deal with the staff, the junior staff that we've got, the students that are here with us at the moment, and whether they're wanting to stay on or go back to university, and how do we balance that with a normal working sort of environment where we would normally welcome new Part 1 staff into the studio, and how we balance that now. So it's a very different situation. I can't say we've resolved it completely, but we're working our hardest to try and look after the people we've got, as well as try and welcome new people in.
I think that's a nice and interesting perspective, because there will be people, I suspect, listening to this who may be thinking about going to a workplace, and they might be worried about how employers are dealing with this and how they're being treated. But I guess there's also the worry of, will I get a work opportunity? Is there work opportunities, and how does that affect me? So I'd like to come to Benjamin. Benjamin, if we could just stick with, for the moment, how you have found, from a mental health perspective, really, the last few months, this kind of change and the impact. How has that affected you in your studies, or, you know, personally?
I think, well, obviously having the year finished, or finishing in mid-June, I've had past few months to unwind and relax and sort of take a break completely. But if we look at the months, you know, mid-March to mid-June, those were very difficult. There was a lot of change very quickly, and I think adapting to that was difficult at first. I think everyone was obviously caught up, especially trying to learn things and trying to get in contact, trying to get help from the university and my tutors. But it did find its path, and being able to access the resources and access the people that I needed to, it did work out in the end. I think also helped in my situation. I stayed in Nottingham. I didn't come back home initially, so I was living with a couple of other architect students, and we all were in the same boat. And we talked about it. We talked about how we felt and the difficulties that we were having, and we managed to work through that, which I think from my standpoint of that helped me a lot. And so even if other students may have not been in such a situation like that, just talking about it to similar people, to people in that similar situation, well, that really helped me, especially.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I'd like to come to Rachel, if I could. Rachel, are there anything right now for you that feels particularly uncertain, that you're worried about? Do you have any concerns at the moment?
Yeah, so in respect to that, I think for me, as I go into my final year of my master's, there's obviously this uncertainty of what will the job market be like in a year's time, 9 months, a year's time. And while I've been working in practice these last few months over the summer, I've been very fortunate to have been taken off of furlough and been able to continue to work and gain experience. Whether these sectors will still have work and there'll still be positions available in a year's time is obviously kind of brings about feelings of anxiety around that. Yeah, and obviously it's kind of then about it. It's then how I approach my masters, and kind of it's led me to think of what ways can I make myself more employable, and kind of what opportunities can I take from that to kind of to equip myself in the best possible way when I'm then looking for jobs.
Yeah, and what's coming up. Okay, Nadia, can I invite you in at this point? Because from a professional perspective, some people find change and uncertainty okay, but others find it more challenging. Why do you think that is? Why is it for some more difficult than it is perhaps for others?
I think we're all individual human beings, aren't we? So the way we process information, the way we think, the way we experience things, our environment, what's kind of going on for us at the moment is completely different. So therefore, actually, things that do come across our way, for example, change, is going to be different for a lot of people. There's also a variety of reasons why people might be more susceptible to managing uncertainty better than others. It could be things from like childhood, it could be even just how they've navigated through life. Either people have taken lots of risks or other people just haven't. And therefore, you just develop a bit more of a vulnerability or just a bit more familiarity with uncertainty and how to deal with that. So there's a wide variety of reasons as to why people could cope better with uncertainty and why they don't. But I think the one, thing to be clear of and just to know is we all cope with uncertainty on a day-to-day basis on different levels, and uncertainty is actually a very natural and normal thing that we go through on a day-to-day basis. We're never really certain of anything else apart from death and maybe taxes. Other than that, actually we're having to experience uncertainty on a day-to-day basis. But of course that comes in waves. And, especially something like this pandemic and with the industry of architecture, having historically suffered from, not a pandemic, but recession, and that causing a lot of rupture within the market and people getting jobs. It might be sort of, especially for architectural students or people within the industry, feeling that sense of uncertainty a lot more. But it's actually really about normalizing uncertainty as a concept, and starting to understand what that means for us currently.
That's a good point, because like you say, I mean, we're talking about this particular time being uncertain, but I can think of times throughout my career where I faced uncertainty. Actually, that's been a theme throughout my career. Ben, could we come to you? Can you recall a time or think of an occasion in your career other than this when it felt particularly uncertain for you? What comes to your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So to put it in context, showing my age here, but I did my part 1 year out back in 2010, and we were deep in a very deep dark recession at that point. And myself and a lot of my cohort at Cardiff University found it quite tough to get placements that year. I was interviewing at places, and they were interviewing dozens of students for one job position, and there wasn't really much going. So I went out and I did work experience with an architectural photographer. I went and did some experience with doing measured surveys and basically trying to get architectural experience in any way I could. And eventually I plugged away and I made contacts, and I got a job that way. But I think that was the big lesson for me, is that, as Nadia said, we all deal with uncertainty differently. But for me, the way to deal with it was to try and actually plug away and find a proactive way out of that scenario, rather than bury my head in the sand and say, oh, everything's so uncertain, I can't find a way out. I couldn't get the dream job I wanted straight away, but actually I found a way to work around that problem by going down other paths, making new contacts. And I think it was a really valuable skill that it taught me, because as I'm sure Benjamin and Rachel will be able to tell us, architecture school is in itself, even without pandemics and recessions, it's a very uncertain place. It's quite a subjective subject. It's not like physics, where you either know the answer or you don't. In architecture, you could pin up the same presentation 2 days in a row, and a different set of critics might give you a completely different grade. So there's inherently uncertainty there. And I think, as Benjamin said, being open about that uncertainty, talking about it, and kind of learning to communicate about our doubts and fears is a really, really important part of not just becoming a good architect, but also a stronger, more resilient person.
I'm really curious about that, Ben, that thinking and how it's changed for you over your career. So you talked about maybe at points having self-doubt or lacking in confidence. And I'm sure probably back then, sitting here now, we might think actually we did come to solutions and find ways to adapt. But I'm curious to know what your internal dialogue was back then, faced with that recession, really thinking, gosh, here I have just studied, what am I going to do? And how has your thinking developed and changed since then?
That's a really interesting question, actually. Well, I mean, I feel like I was actually relatively well prepared for it, because I'd had 3 years of architecture school, which is effectively teaching you how to solve problems. And to an extent, that's what uncertainty is. It's kind of, it's a problem that if you can reframe it to look at a problem like, it's hard for me to find a job. Okay, reframe that problem to actually be an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get creative, find a solution, find a different way to get that job. I tried all kinds of stuff. I phoned up the AJ and said, look, I'm a desperate student. Can you do me a deal? I put the tiniest little postage stamp size advert in the Architects Journal, and they charged me next to nothing for it because they tried to help me out. And I think that's the thing as architects. We are, we've been taught ourselves or learned how to solve problems, and if we can utilize those skills, it makes things it makes it much easier to deal with uncertainty. But I definitely think as I've progressed and moved on in my career, having had my own issues with my mental health, that kind of took me down a very different career path where I wanted to learn about how buildings affect us psychologically, and I knew nothing about it, but I set out to learn about it and try and become really knowledgeable about it. And yeah, at first you do know absolutely nothing, and you do have to just take that plunge, but slowly, gradually, you can kind of, that phrase "fake it till you make it" is absolutely true in architecture. I think to a certain extent, whether it's standing up and giving a meeting to a room full of people that you don't know that might find quite intimidating. They don't know how uncertain or anxious you feel inside. You just have to get up there and put on that game face. And I think the more you do that, the stronger you get. And eventually that anxiety and nervousness will kind of fade away anyway.
Okay, could I come to you, Tom? Because I'm aware as an ambassador, you must help other people. But equally, I'm wondering, sometimes when we might be supporting somebody else through uncertainty, and sometimes we can take a lot of that on ourselves, so we feel like we're helping lots of others or friends or people that we're worried, or family members we're concerned about. How do you look after yourself, Tom, when things aren't that easy, or things aren't going the way you hope they would be? How do you stay well when maybe you're supporting other people around you?
Yeah, another good question. Personally, I'm a big believer, and I'm sure a lot of people are in fitness, and I'm a long distance runner. So part of my job is I talk to people like Ben, who's one of my ambassadors, and a lot of others. We have a network throughout the country of people who kind of support our values and help the work as a charity. And yeah, you're right. Sometimes people have quite a lot of stress, and this is a particularly stressful time, I think, at the moment. And I'm having some really positive conversations, but some really tricky conversations as well. And so I like to go for, I will, after this, we'll go for a long run and try and work out my stuff myself. But I think the other part of it is being able to talk to those around you, and also recognizing when it's important to talk to someone who's an expert on that, and taking that on board. Which is why I really want to let everyone know who's watching this that the Architects Benevolent Society has support which we can help you with. I know there'll be a lot of undergraduate students watching this, and our support, we do have an eligibility criteria. So we ask for 1 year working within the industry to get our full range. But about 3 years ago, we had a partnership with a charity called Anxiety UK, and recognised that mental health was kind of an urgent need within the profession for students as well. So if you are an undergraduate student, you do actually qualify for a limited support from us, where we can give you membership to Anxiety UK, and through that you get certain benefits. And this is all for free, but benefits such as you can use the Headspace app, which you normally pay about £75, I think, a year for that, but it's free through us, and you can really helps you develop ways to take control of your mental health. And there's also a dedicated phone number and email support as well. So yeah, if anybody is watching that, and please get in contact with us, and I'm sure there'll be links in the description where you can do that. And we want students to know about this, and please, if you know anybody else who might need that kind of support, let them know about that support, and it is available. And yeah, of course, and if you have to have a year experience, there are a whole other ways we can help too.
I guess when I think about times when I've had to reach out and ask for help, it's I kind of thought it in my mind, but the act of actually reaching out and asking for help can be really difficult, actually, making that step, going to see someone, picking up that phone. I think that's really challenging. Nadia, from a psychological perspective, is there anything you would say to people, because you're psychotherapist, anything you would say that could break some of those barriers down and help people to reach out to ask for help if they're stuck or struggling?
Yeah, definitely. I think we tend to be immersed in our own internal dialogue. So a lot of the times we get stuck in our own head, and sometimes that can sort of perpetuate a lot of the uncertainty itself. It can actually make our anxiety worse, and we start to gradually isolate and start to feel like, actually reaching out would be a bad thing. But when you think about times, even not just mental health, even at school, different times where you're lost, you ask for directions, you don't regret it. You actually have more to gain than you have to lose. So actually, being curious around it and thinking, what do you actually have to lose by asking for some support? And actually, every support that you do get kind of takes you along that journey of starting to really become more curious and aware of what's going on with you, but also being aware that there is support and that could help other people as well. So, sometimes when you haven't reached out for help for your mental health, think about times where you have reached out for help where it's got nothing to do with your mental health, and how that's helped you, and apply that same principle is what I would say.
Okay, no, that's really good. Chithra, could I come to you, because you're somebody who's, into your career, experienced, on the outside you look like you've got it all together. Have there been times when you've struggled and had to reach out either to a colleague or someone in your organisation, and how did you find that?
I certainly have had to do that, and I have. It's a double whammy, really. My own sort of keeping my own mental health together, but both my husband and my daughter both suffer from mental health conditions, and so I come across this on a daily basis. And as much as you look after other people at work and at home, you have to take time to look after yourself. And I can't. I've reached out to people that I trust within my organisation, that I know that I can open up to, and friends outside of that. I think you just have to find the person that you feel most comfortable with. And as Nadia said, it's taking that first step, really, in vocalizing it. I just do. I think you just do what you need to do, don't you? And then you obviously do it at the appropriate time. I can't let it out willy-nilly at work. So usually, yeah, as long as you feel like you've got somebody that's supporting you and that you can talk to, it means then that you can extend that support to others. It also helps if you're going through that yourself, or you understand from relatives or people that you work with what that feels like. It makes you more empathetic as well, so that whatever I've dealt with, I've managed to, I hope that I have helped other people through my understanding of it.
Okay, that's good. And Rachel, can I come over to you and just ask you your thoughts on, I guess, the student population right now? I'm not asking you to represent all of them, but I'm wondering what you think might be their fears or worries right now at this time. What do you think some of those might be?
Yeah, so I think it ranges, obviously, from students that are going back to university in September, worries over teaching and how that's going to work in the context of the pandemic and social distancing. Obviously, the architecture studio that we return to is going to be totally different this year, be it kind of more distance learning like we saw last term, or a kind of somewhere in between where we're kind of having socially distanced kind of tutorials and online lectures, and just that whole, I think the whole feeling of being away from your peers in a way, and not being able to collaborate in the same way that you would have done in a studio. And I think that's what makes kind of having a real emphasis on support around this time among your peers and with tutors as well in the university is really important, because I think it can leave a lot of students feeling very isolated and not feeling like they have people to lean on for not just support with their studies, but kind of for their own well-being more generally.
It's hard sometimes to know what it is we need and to ask for the support that we need. I think that can be really challenging. I think when I've struggled, it's been hard to articulate what it is I need in terms of support. Then what has been available or is available that you're aware of that's useful for people who might need some of that support?
One of the things that we decided to do here at Assael, I think it was back in 2017, was co-found the Architects Mental Wellbeing Forum. So myself and my boss John Assael here kind of got in touch with a number of practices that had a really great reputation for looking after staff, and we just wanted to try and improve mental health in the industry, because obviously, having been through issues myself and reading some of the stats in the AJ student surveys each year, it was pretty shocking what we were reading. So what we decided to do was try and put together some resources and some information for people who want to read more about mental health or get a better understanding. So I'd recommend people go and have a look at our website if they'd like to know more, which is just amwf.co.uk. And we've got a resources page on there. We put out kind of toolkits for how to look after mental health within practice. We are mostly focused on being within a practice, but a lot of the resources will be very helpful for students too. We've also done a COVID mental health toolkit, but again, just to echo what people have already said, if you're struggling, having been through it myself, the best thing to do is speak to someone before it gets too bad. If the earlier you can get help and support, be that from a friend, a family member, or from a medical professional, then the less likely you are to end up going down that rabbit hole and getting yourself in really bad trouble with your mental health. So I know it's a scary thing to talk about often, but you wouldn't be scared to go to the doctor about a sore throat, and we need to start looking at mental health the same way as we do physical health, really.
That's really good. And I'm wondering, really just to talk now just briefly before we kind of close our discussion about opportunities, because there is, for some, this time is really, really difficult, and for some they might be feeling highly anxious, or even what we don't talk about often is the apathy or the depression that may come from feeling like I can't see the way out, or I can't see my future career or how that's going to pan out. And we've talked a little bit about some of the supports that may be available for people, but I think in any situation there's also opportunities too. So I'd like us just to explore a little bit about what opportunities do you see there are? I kind of want to end on some hopeful message that it's not all doom and gloom. There's got to be some good opportunity, even if it's in terms of coming together as a community, or reaching out to each other. I don't know. What opportunities do you see there are at the moment? Maybe I'll direct that question to, let's start with Benjamin. Benjamin, I know that sounds really strange from you who's starting out in your career, but what do you see are the opportunities that are ahead of you right now?
Well, I think the main sort of advantage I've seen from this time of uncertainty is identifying what triggers spurts of anxiety for myself.
Yeah.
One quite common one that I found is just tidiness on my workspace and my immediate area, and obviously living in a rented a student house, my desk is right next to my bed, and just even taking some time just to organise my things. As an architect student, it can get very hectic very quickly, and just taking a bit of time each day to just organise that at least gives me some sort of basis to then start my day or start my work off right. And I think identifying that and obviously noticing when I haven't done it in a while, it's linked to how I feel and how that then affects my workflow essentially. So yeah, I think it's giving me an opportunity to identify what triggers these moments and helping to combat that and control this.
Helping with your self-awareness to know what works for you personally and how to go about creating that. So maybe there's something, as you're saying there, Benjamin, around controlling some of the things you can control and taking action there, and maybe letting go of some of the things you can't control. So focusing on that. I think that's a really good point. Thank you. And what about Rachel? What do you see other opportunities, Rachel, at the moment?
I think one of the things that I found over the last few months is definitely approaching everything with more of a more balanced kind of lifestyle. So not just my studies and work, but kind of making sure that I made time to keep in touch with friends and kind of have time for myself. Because I found, especially during my undergraduate degree, that I got very focused on my work and almost kind of put aside my own well-being to kind of make sure I got as high a grade as I possibly could. And often that then had a very negative impact on my own mental health. And this period of lockdown and kind of being more isolated has kind of forced me to look more holistically and then prioritise certain things. And that's definitely something that I want to continue to do going forward. And it's definitely very important, I think, for all students, not just now, but kind of going forwards generally.
I think you make a brilliant point there, Rachel, because I think back to when I was studying and how when I was most stressed, I had a tendency to do more because I thought if I just got this done, it will all be okay. But actually that meant I didn't sleep well. It meant I maybe drunk more alcohol. I didn't exercise so much, all of those things that probably just made me feel worse. Nadia, from a professional perspective, how important are those things and how linked are they to our mental health,
Hugely. I think what we tend to think is actually if we focus on one task, especially the one that we either want to achieve really highly in, we want to put all our energy into that. And what that typically does is it then starts to shut off all these other things that actually help our well-being, which I think, Rachel, you illustrated really, really well. And we think, let's just focus on the work and forget everything else. But we don't realize our mental health really depends on various factors that do help us. And the common theme that's, been widespread across this talk today has been support, has been connection, has been being able to have balance, and that could be the smallest things as keeping your desk tidy to having a phone call, and or just having that alone time. So those sort of balanced areas are really important, especially within a pandemic that is isolating. We've been told to stay away, we've been told to keep our distance. We can't really interact as normally as we would do. So actually it's very isolating itself. So to isolate ourselves even more so is going to have even more of a huge impact. So what we're wanting to do is really take a step back and look at it holistically. And we want to think actually when you do take a break off your desk and you have spoken to your friend for an hour, you come back with fresh eyes, you kind of want to do more work as well. And there's been a bit of a break rather than a consistency in one thing can have a huge impact on your mental health, and then start to lead to things like depression, isolation, things like that.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if before we end, we just go round and ask kind of one top tip. What would be your one takeaway or the thing somebody you wish had said to you earlier on in your career? What's that piece of advice that you just wish somebody had said, or hindsight really? Chithra, over to you. What one thing?
I suppose adaptability.
Okay.
I wish somebody had told me that just, especially coming out of uni, that my target career wasn't just the thing that I studied. It was all the other things around it. So I came out in a recession as well back in 1992, and I wasn't. There was nothing around at all, and I suppose this was sort of brought upon me. So I was very lucky. But I think people can seek this because uncertainty drives entrepreneurialism as well. So people need to start to think about different things that they want to do that maybe connect back to what makes them happy. So I was very lucky in the fact that I actually got a job as a secretary back in an architectural practice. And I learned a lot about business. So I never see that from a negative point of view. I see it from a positive point of view, that I learned so much more about business from that perspective and not just as a part two architect. I saw the whole business. So I'd say to people, and I wish people had said that to me, strive further than the career that you've been educated in,
Okay.
and you might learn a bit more.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Ben, what would your top tip be or advice you wish you'd done?
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to kind of that letting go of things that you can't actually control. And certainly with my experiences, a big problem that I had was catastrophizing things. So always having my mind go to the worst possible scenario. And I think that's something that lots of us probably do. But I just got to the point where I was doing it with every single thing throughout my entire day, thinking I'd left my house unlocked or I was left the oven on, I was going to burn the house down. But actually someone told me, life is kind of a bell curve. Pretty much everything's a bell curve. And the majority of stuff that happens is somewhere in the middle. So it's pretty boring. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. But my mind was always going to the terrible. But actually, someone said to me, "There's just as much chance the amazing is going to happen today, and whether it's you're going to get that promotion, or if someone in your family is going to win the lottery, or whatever it might be. Your mind doesn't always go to those things. So why do you always go to the negative? And if I'd known that a bit earlier in my career, I think I would have saved myself a lot of worrying."
Thank you. That's brilliant. Rachel?
I think for me, it would be not to fret over grades. I know I was very guilty of this recently and in undergrad, when I used to kind of be almost obsessed over making sure I get the highest possible grade that I could. And then obviously, like I've said before, put my own well-being on the back burner. And as I've worked in practice and kind of spoken to other people in the industry, I've seen that actually the grades I got and the kind of sacrificing my own well-being for a few % here and there in different submissions is not important in the slightest, even a year after graduating, let alone 10 years down the line. So definitely having a more kind of holistic view of your studies and just your own well-being.
Thank you.
Well-being generally.
Thank you, Rachel. And Tom?
Just coming off mute, sorry. I would say for me, it's try to take time to do the things you enjoy, and of course that's outside of work, but also within your work environment. I think a lot of my role is I kind of connect different people who want to help, and we do a lot of events and try to do a lot of fun activities. But I can't stress enough how many times I'll be running an event where I'm meeting a whole load of new people, and they're kind of helping out and helping the charity, but then they'll communicate afterwards that was so much fun. And they did a bit of networking and stuff at the same time, but they also got to do something that was actually quite enjoyable. And I think during lockdown, it's been really hard because I think a lot of those social interactions have really been taken away. But you can still keep doing them. There's still online ones and ways to find connection with other people, and I think they're very fun. And I think I keep trying to do those. I'll promote one what we're doing at the ABS, but there's Time to Sketch, which is happening on the 24th of September, which is a drawing one where you can take an hour out of your day if you're at university, if you're at a practice, and just come together and try to draw. We give you a topic, but it doesn't have to be ours. Anything, any kind of thing, just kind of break it up and make work fun. I think that's
brilliant. Thank you. Benjamin, can we come to you? I'm aware of time, so quick tip from you, or?
I think on the topic of learning to accept that not everything is in our control, not forgetting that as things sort of gradually become normal, hopefully, that you take notice of the things that do sort of trigger you and affect you. I think it's very important that you notice those and you take action on those, because without taking that action, you're not going to resolve it.
Thank you. And finally, Nadia, what from a professional perspective would be your top tip, briefly?
There's so many, aren't they? Briefly, I would say you have the most control in the present moment. So, being sort of grounded in the present moment allows that, limitation of rumination, because rumination sometimes feels like problem solving, but it isn't. So trying to sort of ground yourself in the present as much as possible, I think is probably one of my best advice.
I think that's a brilliant one to end on. That's fabulous. I wish I'd heard this conversation years back when I was studying. It would have been really useful to me. Can I just thank you, everyone on the panel, for being so open and honest today and sharing your thoughts and feelings about this really important subject. Thank you for your time. Thank you, audience, for listening. We hope you found this useful, and we hope to connect with you again in the future. So thank you, and stay well, everyone.